Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, Ultiworld's senior editor, Keith Rayner. It is Wednesday, July 19th. And Keith, pretty big news over the weekend. There was a triple spike.
Where were you when Ben Jagt was ejected and unejected from
Given that I'm over in
AUDL
Finland right
regular
now,
season match?
I'm pretty sure I was fast asleep in the middle of the night. So Ben Jagt, as I'm sure everybody who's probably already seen this, but Ben Jagt scores a goal, kind of gets a little contact. He didn't get backpacked, but there was some contact from the defender. And this is a big game. Okay, back-to-back game for New York. They just beat Colorado the night before in a tight game. They're playing in Salt Lake in front of over 2,000 people. Awesome atmosphere. Incredible scene. Jagt scores. He spikes it, pretty aggressively by the defender. He picks the disc up. He spikes it again. And then he picks the disc up and he spikes it again. And then, Keith, he is ejected from the game by the referee. And it's, of course, been a massive debate around should he have been ejected? Should he not have been ejected? The thing is, he actually doesn't end up leaving the game because Salt Lake invokes the integrity rule, and the coach, Bryce Merrill for Salt Lake, I guess convinces the officials to bring him back to the game. Even though it's not clear that that's like an integrity rule option to like uneject somebody, but it happened and he continued in the game.
It does follow the spirit of the integrity rule to that part.
It does. Even if it's not letter of the law, it's certainly spirit of the law. We both have to just give our straight up opinion. Was it a legit ejection? What did you think of the way this played out, Keith? I hope we haven't discussed this beforehand. I hope we have different takes, but we'll see.
Illegitimate ejection, legitimate to the letter of the law. In that sense, legitimate. But come on, you give the guy the tech, you give him the warning, give him the ensuing penalty on the pull or whatever on the next possession. Give him a warning, and that's probably how it should have ended. There's a little bit of context here, right? Like Jagt gets the catch over the defender, spikes it really close to the defender, and the defender picks the disc up and says something. I don't know what was said. I don't know if it's been reported. Odds are, and from my read, it was probably something like, hey, do you got to spike the disc like that? You're going to damage the disc, or like, oh, nice job tacoing the disc or whatever, because he hands it back to Jagt, the defender. And then Jagt goes in for the extra spikes, and he is edge spiking the hell out of it. Like at that point, he's trying to bend that plastic into the earth. He wants it to become 6 feet deep, and he's going for it, and he definitely does. The disc is pretty messed up by the end. So make your we're running out of supply of discs joke if you need to, and all of that occurs, and then the ejection happens. You can't eject Ben Jagt in this situation. You can, however, Charlie. I'm going to hold it. I'm going to put a pin in this idea. I want to hear your thoughts on the legitimacy of the ejection before I take you somewhere else.
Total overreach by the official. Total overreach. Look, this is a big game between the two top teams in the league, undefeated teams, jockeying for the number one overall seed in the playoffs. It's a hotly anticipated game. You got thousands of people there. You can't eject a guy for like essentially what is taunting. You just can't. Now, if it's his second tech, okay, fair enough. If he threw the disc at the defender, okay, we're having a different conversation. Spiking the disc 3 times, while definitely over the line of going from just sort of a celebratory, angry spike to being something that could be given a technical foul, I have zero issue with a technical foul. But to eject a star player from the visiting number one team in the league, you just can't do it. It is a sin against refereeing to do it. And I don't care whether you like Ben Jagt or you don't like Ben Jagt, you like spiking, you don't like spiking. The fact is, this is a part of the game at the highest level. No players actually care. This doesn't hurt anybody. This wasn't a physical altercation. You should. We don't even see players get ejected from the AUDL for sometimes making horrible bids. Way worse thing to do than spiking the disc 3 times. I think the referees obviously need to keep control of the game. It's getting heated. It's getting chippy. But it has to be a yardage penalty enforced there. You just can't eject a player. And I think that you're seeing that acknowledged by the fact that Salt Lake is like, wait a minute, no way. It's way too much. I was surprised that Evan Lepler on the broadcast said it was legit. I would have vehemently disagreed with him had I been on the air.
All right, I've got a salvo for you then here.
Go.
First off, the defender in question, I'm pretty sure from Lepler's commentary, was McKay Jorgensen, who's the youngest of the Jorgensens on the team. I think maybe just finished his freshman year of college. We're big bros right there. You're not spiking it on my little brother that. They should have been. The other Jorgensens should have been ejected. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we want a brawl. We need a brawl, Keith. We need a benches clearing incident.
At least make them hold you back. You know, at least be like, at least make Ben Jagt think like, oh man, I just pissed off like 8 people at the same time.
There should have been Jorgensens coming out of the stands. I mean, I'm talking
really
about like all the Jorgensen clan.
Secondarily, I think it was Chris Bartoli I saw on Twitter who had a nice thought, which is that he said basically, you really get like 2, maybe 3 chances to triple spike in your entire career, and to waste it on this boring 2-hand like body position goal is a crime. That's the real crime. I thought that was pretty funny.
We can also acknowledge that maybe the reason Ben Jagt was ejected was because of how lame the whole situation was for him to spike triple. I think the thing is here's like a deeper part of this. The Empire is such a hateable team right now.
Super hateable.
They're so good. They're annoying. Like they have Jagt doing troll stuff. They got Osgar doing troll stuff. Anytime Jeff Babbitt gets a D, he throws the flex up. It's incredible television. And it also makes every single fan base other than New York just hate their guts. It's awesome. It's great for the league to have a great team, be kind of a villainous team. This isn't the like fun-loving, faceless army New York of the past. It's like they feel like the Yankees, but with like guys who annoy the other team a lot. And you got to give them credit. They're an incredible team. It's maybe one of the best teams we've ever seen in the AUDL. And to go into Colorado and Salt Lake on a back-to-back and win both games, super impressive. But yes, it's like the villain side of it is great. And this whole ejection thing, like it's great. It's great to talk about. Let's be honest.
You're getting to my final point here. What if what McKay Jorgensen really said as he handed that disc back to Ben Jagt was, hey, don't forget the script here. Don't forget what's supposed to happen next. Because this has been such an engagement farm for AUDL. Like they had this social media keyed up to fire this one off. Everything about it. The home crowd booing him blowing kisses to them on his next goal. Bryce Merrill with the absolutely heroic use of the integrity call. I mean, if there's a big winner here, I feel like it's Bryce Merrill, who like just no cost chance to save the day.
You see his interview?
I did, and I thought it was a nice try. I think there was a little clever line. I didn't want to give him a free out. I think he was tired. I think he's sucking air in the thin atmosphere here, and I want to keep him on the field. I mean, that's preposterous. There's no way that you think that your team has a better chance of winning with the multi-time MVP staying on the field. Ridiculous assertion, but funny.
I think it was pretty clearly tongue in cheek.
Yes, it was. And but it just fits the script. Come on. This was all planned. This is a wrestling move. Empire's the heel. This was all according to someone. Someone dig out the script. Someone leak the script. That's what we need.
Good stuff. Well, I mean, New York, very impressive. To go into Salt Lake in front of a hostile crowd and come away with, decently convincing victory. Empire clearly has earned the number 1 seed, and they are going to be very tough to beat at championship weekend.
You don't say. I think, do you put DC firmly in number 2 now, right after what we've seen, and Salt Lake knows that they have work to do.
And I will say, not super surprised. The West has long had very interesting regular seasons, followed by the team that gets out of the West getting shellacked at championship weekend. Was Salt Lake even going to get out of the West? That's not a guarantee, although I think they're certainly the favorite at this point. Okay. Let's turn our attention over to the Pro Elite Challenge East as we get ready to kind of talk about the club season in earnest here, Keith. And PEC East, like PEC West, had some very interesting results. And so just a quick rundown of, what happened at the tournament. Scandal beats Phoenix and takes down the women's division. In the mixed division, Shine beats Amp in the final. So how about that for Shine? And Ring of Fire over Dig, as they got some reinforcements on Sunday, takes down the men's division. But there were a lot of other surprises along the way, Keith. And, upsets in pool play, upsets in bracket play, crazy results. What do you feel like surprised you the most this weekend?
I'll be honest with you. Who is Ramp? That's the biggest surprise. Who the hell is Ramp? And why are they playing Amp? And is this a joke? Or is this a noise hybrid situation going on here?
I'm going to start a team called Cramp, and then we're going to just keep it going.
Just keep it going. That was honestly the biggest surprise. The 14 seed, a team I literally hadn't heard of. My understanding is they formed last year. They're a Chicago area team. They picked up Penny Wu this year. They have some names you recognize if you follow Chicago area elite ultimate. This is not a joke team or anything. I don't know if they're going for a more UPA kind of vibe. I think someone said that the team name stands for really another mixed program or something like that. Which is pretty funny. That is
their Twitter handle or bio is really another mixed program.
That's kind of a kind of funny meta reference. I'm in for that. But look, they came out and they had success. They went 2-1 and ended up breaching the bracket based on that. Then they compete with Amp. They lose that game 11-9 in semis. A pretty serious showing for them. And that to me, honestly, they beat Space Force in quarters to get into that semifinal. A team I literally didn't know existed until this tournament began. Coming in and showing out was the biggest surprise to me.
That's very fair. They had a sign that was an R and then the Amp logo. So I think they're leaning into the Amp thing here. There was a picture of that over on Twitter. We'll see if we can put it in the YouTube version here. So yeah, that was wild. I don't even know where to begin with some of these games. In fact, it may be easier to kind of just zoom out and talk a little bit more about the divisions overall and kind of where things stand after the kind of the tumultuous early part of the season, teams finding their feet. And as we looking ahead to, 2 weeks from now when we have the US Open and the top teams are in action and we got international teams coming over and feels like the season really kind of starts in earnest at the beginning of August. So let's start at the top of kind of PEC East and look at, the women's division. Do you make much of Scandal beating Phoenix and where do those teams fit in the overall picture of the women's division right now?
I'm always going to take these early season results with a grain of salt, but I think that when you get two good teams playing against each other, they're probably going to try and make the most out of those opportunities. But I was pretty high on Scandal coming into the year, And I don't think there's any reason to doubt that they're a team that's good enough to beat Phoenix when it counts. Am I going to make much of this 11-6 win in what I imagine were pretty strange conditions? Basically everything but semis and finals got rained out. There was a bunch of rain delays. There were other tournaments. The East Coast absolutely buffeted on Sunday. So that could have had an impact on things. They were still playing on turf, but having a weird delay in your day could certainly change the tenor of how you're performing. But the Scandal team has plenty of talent, I think, to be a semifinal quality team. And we'll probably talk more about the landscape of the women's division and how that might line up for them. But I think that they're good enough to be a contender on paper. And so this kind of result seems perfectly in line with my expectations. I picked Scandal to beat Phoenix when we did our picks, but I consider those teams pretty coin flippy coming into the year. And now I can push a little bit of the edge to Scandal, but still very, very close matchup between the two teams in my mind.
I'm pretty impressed with Scandal's results overall. I mean, they just crushed teams. Their closest game was that Phoenix game, 11-6. They beat Parcha by 11. They beat Nemesis by 9. I mean, I don't think those teams are on their level, but to me, it starts to make me think about, okay, like, how good is Scandal? Is this a team that's back in the conversation for a national championship? It doesn't feel like it should be. And I don't want to overreact to an early season tournament for sure. But then again, Claire Trope is top 5 player in the division right now, Keith. And they have great depth. They have the star powers. They have throwers. They have defenders. I don't see why this can't be an awesome team. And, it's one thing if they beat Phoenix by a couple points and you're like, yeah, maybe they play again. 11-6 is a beatdown. So I don't know. I don't think we haven't seen Scandal put up results like this since at least 5 years ago. I don't even remember the last time we've seen big dominant performance from Scandal like this over otherwise like solid national teams.
But we don't even know exactly how good this Phoenix team is compared to the field. I mean, it's not like they were dominating last year. So I think that to me, this shows how close together I think these two teams are. But you look at Scandal's roster, they didn't lose very much coming into the year. They picked up some good players. We've seen obviously top level play from them in the PUL, where there's a lot of crossover between these two rosters. They have Jenny Faye back on the field for them. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to like Scandal moving forward as a team that could really compete.
Yeah, and I would just say, let's not forget, Scandal got to quarters last year and lost to Molly Brown 15-11. That's a pretty close game. I don't necessarily know that I think that they've gotten like substantially better from last year, but the idea that they've gotten incrementally better makes sense to me. And if you're going to play, let's say, a 15-13 game with Molly Brown, and you're like a 2 to 3 point underdog instead of like a 4 to 5 point underdog, to me, that starts to put you in the conversation for like, yeah, like this team could actually win a championship. Basically what I'm saying, I have upgraded what I think that this team can be, compared to the Mollies and the Furies in the division.
I think you're just catching up to me on that front. I think that's maybe what I'm getting at.
That's fair.
I think I was higher on them coming into the year than you were.
I think that's probably correct. I think that's correct. Elsewhere, I think an interesting team that we've been kind of keeping an eye on is Bent. Bent goes 4-1. They have a very close win over Grit. They beat Ozone and Tabby and Vengeance. They lose by 2 to Phoenix. All things considered, this feels like a pretty good start for Bent. It feels like it's going to put them in the bid conversation for sure. And, are we seeing a team starting to, take those steps forward that we've kind of been anticipating for Bent for what it feels like 2 or 3 years?
The talent is there. We've seen good things from their pro side at points. I think that you have to feel pretty good about the roster, and it's going to be a lot about how do they put things together. A team that's not used to having a ton of success, are they prepared to do that? So it's going to be a lot about mental game and preparation, I think, on their part. And so the coaching staff and the leadership is going to be the ones who I think you're going to be turning to see how that is progressing. But this is a perfectly good start for them, being able to compete with Phoenix. I'm sure they'd love to take a win off a team like that this point in the season, but everything else points to a sign of being a team that could play spoiler, but you can't really place right now as the favorite to reach a semifinal, which I think we still kind of basically consider the bar for being a really good team.
Sure. Any other teams that you really want to talk about here? That we don't have a lot of consolation play. It makes it a little bit harder to assess all of the results. The other semifinalist, it was Parcha, but they got crushed by Scandal 15-4.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously, like you look down the line, you see that Parcha team played super close with Rival, with Ozone, with Grit. So I think that's a clear tier divide between the top three teams and everybody else, which is not a new thing in this division. And I do think that you got a pretty crowded field behind them. I think there are going to be some teams that don't reach nationals that are as good as some of the teams that are in the bottom of the pools in nationals. But that band seems pretty wide. When you even look down the line to the teams like Pop and Flight and Rival, Vengeance. But I think we otherwise are kind of looking to see, can one of these teams in that mid-tier breakout? Can they get a big win? Can one of them beat a Bent or a Scandal or a Phoenix later in the season when we're starting to really get a sense of who these teams are? Is there going to be some potential for that upset, or is there going to be just a clear line, like here's the top 6, 7, 8 teams and here's everybody else?
So Keith, give me your semifinals contenders right now in the women's division as we look ahead to the season and eventually the series.
Well, we just talked about two of the main contenders in Scandal and Phoenix. I think if you're looking to kind of say like who are the favorites for those spots right now, obviously you're going to start at the top with Fury and Molly Brown, and then I think Brute Squad is the next team in line and probably a tier above any of the other contenders. Based on what their roster looks like. But then after that, that's where you get into Phoenix, Scandal, Flipside. And how far you go down this list is really, really the question. And we've seen a great start to the season from Traffic. How for real is that? Are they a team that could really contend? How about Bent? How about Sixers? Is Riot or Schwa at that point? That's the real question. I think there are a number of teams fighting for that fourth spot or potentially to upset Brute Squad. And to me, I think I cut it off. It feels rough to rule Sixers out this early. So yeah, at this juncture, I'm not going to rule them out. I'm going to be a little more open to different things going on here. So I would say you get about 9 teams deep for teams competing for semifinals, but really that's like 2 big favorites, 1 tier 2 team, and then 6 teams that are trying to fight into that either the tier above them or just taking that last spot.
Seeding is going to be very important this year at nationals. I'm actually going to say that even Bent right now for me is not there. It's hard to go from being a team that isn't at nationals to being a team that is going to the semifinals of nationals. That just doesn't really happen. And I know they're more talented this year. And it's not like it's never been done before. But I think Flipside is the bottom of the list for me. And consider me skeptical of Traffic with the early season results. I'm holding it in my mind that they could be there. But for me, I think it's Phoenix, Scandal, Flipside is the teams that I'm really looking at for that fourth spot. I agree with the top 3. It's easy call. Easy call. Okay, let's talk about the men's division. Ring, after missing some AUDL players on day 1, comes back on day 2. They drop a game on day 1. They come back on day 2 and they win the tournament. Pretty, this wasn't like the world's best field, but it was very solid. How much do we think Ring is in a position to be bouncing back? After winning a title 2 years ago, kind of feeling like they came up short last year, never really integrating a great O-line at any point. Is this a sign of Ring is back?
I think so. I think that this is probably a good sign for a Ring team that I think it's easy to forget until Nationals, they were really highly rated. I mean, we felt really good about them as a semis contender. They were the number 3 team in the power rankings, I'm pretty sure, coming into Nationals. And yeah, they bombed out of Nationals. They struggled when it counted the most. But that was really, 2-3 rounds of play where they weren't playing like an elite team. And yes, it was the most important ones. That is how we define who wins and who loses. But I think that writing them off maybe was a little bit overblown. Now, that said, you can't see the players that they lost on their roster and not think, okay, this team is due for a step back. And if you think that these results indicate that there is not going to be a step back, that I'm probably going to disagree with. That I think is probably in the cards as far as like their overall potential for their season. It's just not as high as it was last year. When you lose Jack Williams, John Nethercutt, Ryan Osgar, Henry Fisher, Dylan Lanier, Charlie McCutcheon, Terrence Mitchell. I mean, that's basically an elite level team right there. all gone from the roster. And there's just no way to see that and not think that lowers your ceiling. Now, maybe they can fix whatever went wrong last year and end up placing as well as last season, or maybe even placing higher. But I would have a tough time believing that this team has the potential to do what we felt like last year's team did.
You mean the team from 2 years ago when they won?
Well, certainly that team too, yes. But I mean, what we projected last year's team to be like.
Sure. Okay, I get what you're saying.
If we say that last year's team didn't hit their ceiling, which I think is fair to say, I just don't think this team's potential comes near what that team's potential was.
I think they have pretty darn good homegrown talent in Carolina, though, and like trying to integrate players like they did last year with Jack and Ryan very late in the season is not easy. Even really talented players like those two. And I think maybe they were a little bit lucky to have things clicking the way that they did 2 years ago when they did a similar thing. And then it didn't really work out last year. But I'm a little higher on their potential than you are, especially after this weekend. My question will be like, how consistent is their offense? I think their D-line is going to be good and they're going to get breaks. And I think having watched these U24 guys look amazing, we cannot undersell the quality that they're bringing in their pipeline with club-ready players who are 22, 23, 24 years old. And so, sure, they lose some of the big names from the top end, but, look down this roster. They are very solid. And, how good is Ben Dameron going to be in the club division this year? It's possible he's going to be among the best players, Keith. Is it crazy to think that Ben Dameron could get an all-club spot? He just looked like the best player at U24s. Yes. You think it's crazy? I don't think so.
I would be shocked if he gets a role sizable enough to give him that opportunity. Because now he's competing.
That's fair.
He's competing for touches with Anders and Alex Davis and Eric Taylor and Elijah Long, Jacob Fairfax, LSB.
Most of those
not
players,
even mentioning the handlers.
I think he's better than most of the players you just named. Not all, but most. My point is, they have guys who are ready to win now in club, coming in who are not the big names yet, but could be soon. And so I'm intrigued because of the youth on this roster. They've kind of moved a lot of the older guys off this team. And this is like a team that's largely comprised, along with randomly Matt Rader, largely comprised of guys who are under 27 years old. And that's a recipe for success long-term in the club division. Maybe not this year, but soon. On the flip side, you got Pony, who's ancient team. Do they still have a championship window? I think the answer is clearly yes for this season, but I do think it's worth asking whether they're getting too old to win. How long can you rely on Sean Keegan? It seems like forever, but
Imagine Pony just. It's going to be Masters Championship this weekend. Imagine Pony just goes to Masters one year. We're done with club division play. We're just going straight into Master Division.
Well, I think, this pony team, we should talk about them a little bit, Keith. Excellent team. I mean, their pickups are fantastic. Even though I'm just giving them some grief for being older, they're still, they still have some of the guys who are absolutely in the middle of their primes who are joining up on this team. So getting Jack and Williams and Ryan Osgar is huge. They're also picking up Sean Mott, who's definitely maybe lost a step at this point, but is still a very serviceable cutter. Alan Laviolette, who looked amazing for Ring 2 years ago. Cam Werner, super defender, and Tony Paletto, who's going to be a solid role player for them. They're not necessarily losing tons of critical pieces either. So you combine those folks with Jimmy, Kotcher, and the rest of this pony core, you got to feel pretty good about it, especially with some really, really talented young players like John Randolph already on the team.
They've gotten the hype. I mean, people are bringing up. Remember that year that Revolver looked just absolutely stacked. We were like, is this the best men's club team ever? Like that I feel like is how people are treating this pony roster, and I get it. I mean, this was looked like a stacked roster in 2022, and then they add two of the best players in the world, like at least two. It's also hard not to conflate them with the Empire in some ways, who have done some of the same things. You get the Jack Oscar crossover here and the New York pickups. Like, look, this team has a ton of talent on the roster. They have a lot of experience together. They're a veteran team too, so I don't think they're going to be easily shaken. I mean, it's mostly about how do you integrate all of this talent together. Now, to be fair, in some ways it felt like that last year, and it was clear that they weren't able to establish a big gap between them and the rest of the field. Who knows had semis gone differently, but I just think it was obvious that while they were good enough to win a title, I don't think that they were far and away better than everybody else. So will they be that good this year that they don't even have to have their foot on the gas the whole time? Maybe. I mean, I just think that there's so many, it's like on top of being really talented, there's a ton of winning experience here. They're a big favorite in my mind to win this thing, especially because there's not even really a clear who's the next best team out. Like there's no team that you're like, wow, this is definitely a title team. Maybe you say DC, but I don't know.
But so much is riding on what happened with DC last season. And, I don't think that we've seen that same core of players achieve the same level of play so far this year in the AUDL. That's just a proxy, of course, but it's worth noting. And, look at the next teams in the power rankings. It's Truck Stop, Rhino, Bravo, Machine, Ring, all really solid teams. Dig will be up there. These are good teams, but it does feel like Pony's in a class of their own right now on paper. But it's obvious. You take the core of last year's team, you bring in Jack Williams and Ryan Osgar, and that's going to make it feel like super team time. And they should win. If they don't win, they've probably failed to achieve what they should have, to be honest. The expectations are going to be heavy on this team.
But even that won't be foreign to them. Like they have been down that road before. They've had 3 years of them being treated like a title team, like a champion. I think that even that part will be old hat for them.
Let me remind you, Keith, that Pony won the championship in 2018. That's 5 years ago. They have not won again, despite being considered the favorite or a top level contender most of the rest of those years. I think it's fair to say Sockeye was clearly the favorite in 2019, but since then it's been Pony. Pony's been the team. 2021, they lose to Ring in a crazy game where they should have taken offense. And then in 2022, Bravo wins, but who knows what could have happened last year. But like you said, Truck Stop was the best team start to finish last season. and Bravo had a miraculous run in the bracket, but Pony came up short. And who knows what happens if Grant doesn't get hurt, but they came up short. And it's been a long time since they've won.
Are you betting against them?
No, I'm not.
Exactly.
Too much talent. Too much talent.
Yeah. If they crumble though this year, I think you start to ask some hard questions.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You can't keep, relying on the 2018 title to carry you at this point. What a stretch though. Since 2016, no repeat champions in the men's division. Ironside, Revolver, Pony, Sockeye, Ring, Bravo. I'd say the odds are pretty good for a repeat this year. Maybe Truck will finally get their title.
I think there's a perfectly good case for Truck. I'm sure there are many folks who would love to make it after last year, and I wouldn't say they have like very little turnover, but the core of that team feels like it's pretty intact from last year's team, which feels, for them, as vital as anybody. They feel like a team that really benefits from cohesiveness, from familiarity with the system and with each other. So that core component is good for them. But I also feel like they have a lot of players who feel like they're really hitting the thrust of their career. You think of Christian Boxley and Cole Jurek, Johnny Malks, Jagt Nissen. These are guys who feel like they're like really have their best ultimate to play now and in the next few years. So and I get the case for DC, and I think they're a very compelling challenger.
I totally agree. I think they like Ring have an infusion of young talent that is going to keep this team, assuming they keep all, the band together, it's going to keep this team competitive for years to come. And, how about Ben Ort? He's been a revelation in the AUDL, great player. Andrew Roy, recently out of college, rock steady O handler, even in the club division. AJ Merriman, great pickup for them. Charlie McCutcheon, Fred Farah, they have great defenders. They have all the pieces. We saw that they can put together a truly elite club offense last year. Can they find the consistency, and can they compete with a team in New York that has kind of dominated most of this core in the AUDL? And those are not the same teams, but the biggest pieces from the Empire do play for Pony now.
I think the Truck also is just they probably feel like they're over their little brother syndrome. I don't think they're going to play scared of anybody. And I think that they gained a lot of confidence last year. It really proved that their methodology can be successful. I think they have to feel like last year's team was just about as close to being a title team as you can be without actually winning it. That team was of the caliber necessary. And so knowing you can get there is a big part of the mental component of being a champion. And I think DC now has that belief fully solidified.
I wonder how often they think about that title game, losing to a team they had beaten earlier in the tournament. Brutal.
Handily, if I'm not mistaken.
Brutal. They had their worst offensive game of the season. Credit to the Bravo defense, but that's a tough pill to swallow if you're DC. A lot of heartbreak for that DC team and DC City in the men's side of things, the AUDL and club. Quickly, let's do this. Let's do the semis tier conversation again. Obviously, Pony and Truck. We've already talked on the show about Rhino, the addition of Dylan Freechild. I'm still wondering a little bit what to make of this Bravo team coming into this season. I feel like they're poised for a big step backwards, motivation, and I don't know. We'll see. They're certainly in the semis conversation, but I still go, I think Ring, Machine, then Bravo, and do I want to go Dig and Revolver in the semis conversation? I kind of do, Keith. I don't know if that's
Whoa.
too many teams, but I think I might. Really
That's
like the
big.
potential for those teams. I may be too big.
Yeah, I mean I think you again I think you have a very similar setup to what we talked about in the women's division. You've got these 3 teams that feel like they're the most likely, and you could tier them however you see fit. Maybe they're all 3 in 3 separate tiers. Maybe you have Pony on a separate tier, then Truck and Rhino, which is probably where I land. And then after that, there's a glut, and it's like, how far down that group do you get? Like right now, you didn't mention Double Wide. They're number 7 in our power rankings. Would you include them in that? I kind of want to see it from Double Wide before I buy that. So to me, I said I want to be more open to teams, but I don't feel that way right now about these teams. I think to me it is those 6 teams. It's Bravo, Machine, and Ring. And here I can't really explain why. Just that my gut instinct says I want to make Double Wide dig, and my sleeper team, Chain Lightning. I want to make those teams prove to me that they could be a semis team.
Yeah, I mean the chain, back to prominence conversation has been bubbling for a couple years now, and I'll believe it when I see it.
That's totally fair.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we will talk the mixed division, and we will do our mailbag question of the week, a new segment here on Deep Look. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Deep Look. So, Keith, Shine out of Nashville wins PEC East over AMP after not making nationals last year. This is, we could have maybe said this was the biggest surprise of the tournament. Obviously, Shine has been a good team. They're in a deep region, and they were probably the favorite to get to nationals last year, even though they didn't make it. Are you upgrading this team? I should note, they did lose a game. They lost 15-10 to Hybrid in their opener.
Yeah, 3 weeks ago, they got dogged by Jug Handle 15-8, Like,
that was in a tournament called Frogs, which I'm going to go ahead and just not take much stock in.
Look, this is classic mixed division. Like, trying to suss out the semis tier here feels like a fool's errand, if I do say so myself. But look, I liked Shine last year. I think that you like some of the additions. Obviously, the big name for them is Callahan winner Justin Burnett that they're adding to the team. But I feel like every year they've added a little bit more top-end talent to this team, and that's helping the rest of the roster get better each year. I mean, I see no reason to, as we did last year, think this could be the best team in the Southeast and be a team that could contend for a bracket spot. And if you could make the bracket in mixed, you could make the final. You could win the damn thing, right? Like, there's just a mountain of evidence that indicates that's true. So they've got a shot. I don't know. I'm not putting too much stock in this early season result, but I was thinking this team could compete before PEC. In fact, I think I was a little disappointed with how they started off the year at Frogs, more than anything.
At Frogs.
What does it stand for?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly a positive sign. And I don't necessarily want to put too much stock in Shine losing their opener, I think sometimes game one of a tournament, teams don't play their best. And they certainly picked it up over the course of the rest of the weekend. They beat Sprocket and Crocs in the bracket before beating AMP by 1 in the final. Decent overall results. I find it hard to buy on any of these teams at this tournament, though. I kind of want to sell all of it, to be honest with you. And maybe AMP is just not there anymore as a team that can win a championship. I mean, we've had this team up at the top for a long time, but I'm just not sure that I've seen the evidence the last couple seasons. I guess the question is, who do you put in front of them besides the teams that are already sitting, in the top 4 ahead of them at number 5 in the power rankings? And I'm sure they're going to drop, But, exist, sure. Undefeated so far. Maybe have played some games a little closer than you'd like to see. Dragon Thrust, we know the quality of that team year in and year out. They've gotten better this season. The Seattle teams, even if Mixtape's results feel a little sketchy, I think they get the benefit of the doubt because of last year. It feels flat to me in the mixed division this year. I don't see an obvious team, which I think means Noise is going to win the whole thing.
I don't know what to do with AMP, to be honest with you. I can't say that I feel like I've ever been able to quite get the pulse of that team. And maybe they feel the same way themselves. I mean, I've been high on that team for multiple years, and you look at 2022, what do? They lose in quarterfinals. Or they lose in quarters. Same thing in 2021. And 2019, they win a title. 2018, they win a title. Like, I don't know. Even like the teams have always felt that good. So in the same way you were kind of drawing up the conversation around Pony, like, wow, it's been a little while since they've won that title. And what have they done since then? Amp's foibles, Amp won their title more recently, and in that time they won back-to-backs. It was 3 straight finals appearances. So you give them some credit there, but their foibles in 2021 and 2022 were a lot worse. I mean, remember when they were on the brink of disaster in what was that, 2021, where they looked like they were going to get flushed out on day one, and they turned it around. So I don't know, man.
Mix is crazy. Mix is crazy.
I don't know what to do with Amp specifically, and it makes it worse that Mix is crazy, and they're emblematic of that fact. But like every time I look at the roster, I'm like, wow, this team's so good. They look so good. But I can't put my heart on the line anymore.
Keith has given up on them. Yeah, I mean, like, who do you feel that Exist is the title favorite? Like, what were the odds? You set the odds. I want to see the odds that you set in the super contest, Keith.
Dude, have we explained the super contest? I feel like we just made passing.
Why don't you briefly explain what a super contest is? We talk about it as if people know what a super contest is.
Basically, it's like a fake sports book. Like you're betting with a set budget. Everybody starts with $100, and whoever has the most money by the end of the super contest wins the actual money that people paid to participate. Right? Like, yeah. So that's the game.
So Keith, you set Mixtape as the favorite at plus 190, and then in the second spot you have Exist at plus 315, and then Dragon Thrust at plus 480, BFG at plus 650. Now I got to be honest, Mixtape at plus 190. I wish I could bet against that. I don't think I'm allowed to, but I don't think that Mixtape should be considered the favorite. They've lost too many pieces. They're still going to be good, and they could win, but Kelly Johnson was a very big part of the reason that they won the title last year. And now what are they going to do on offense?
I don't know. Give it to Cassie Wong, Sadie Jezierski, Steph Lim. Like, I get that they lost some good players. They lost Brad Hauser. They lost EK. They lost Cogburn. Like, they lost China. Like, there's a lot of good players they lost. They brought in Cassie Wong, Jack Brown, Mario O'Brien, Sage Jezierski, Steph Lim. Like, they have a young core that's probably ready to have that breakout. I mean, we saw Alex Nelson. You saw what Mark Munoz was doing on the U24 stage.
Yeah.
Zach Sabin. Like,
so why is this team getting their butt kicked at their first tournament?
Because their first tournament, because it's Mixtape, right? Like,
last year, how does this
negatively impact their ability to win the title, right? Like,
it doesn't, but it's still information. It's data, Keith.
Look, I won't say that it's not a little concerning, especially because, like Khalif was there, right? Like, Bert's there, I'm pretty sure, right? Like,
I think they had
the people you expect to be good. it should be hard for those players to play really badly. So I'm not going to say it caused zero concern, but just like, it's a tournament in late June or whatever, early July. Like, come on. You could stress this stuff about mid-level teams who haven't proven anything. You don't stress this stuff about mixtape, I don't think.
It's very fair. It's very fair. They certainly get the benefit of the doubt. I'm kind of feeling like, where is red flag in this whole conversation? Kind of like this team. They have a lot of the best players in Vancouver on their team. They've certainly come up short before, but I don't know. I don't know where I'd put my money. I don't know that I'm going to place bets in the mixed division because I don't have a lot of sense of clarity right now. But it should be an exciting season once again.
Just take some long shots. If you think that anything's possible, right? Go ahead and grab some long shots. Put some money on.
It's better than betting on the Canadian women to medal at U24s and burning my money in the furnace.
or any team from Canada to medal at U24s. I don't know if that inspires confidence in how you think red flag is going to do. Or you know what? You could just put some money on your friend's noise. Plus 1450.
It is tempting, but I think they've lost too much.
That's exactly what they want you to think, Charlie.
It's time to get to our mailbag question of the week. Keith, what do we got this week? This is a new segment. We're doing a mailbag question every week. We want to hear your questions. Send them into deeplook@ultiworld.com and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
You can also tweet at us, deeplookpod, or get at us in the Discord. That's where this week's question comes from Exor in the Discord. Where are we on the transition from the last set of dominant players to the new set of dominant players, and the follow-up, who is in the new set of dominant players?
Oh, man. These are gradual things. It's not like there's some sort of bright line cut off from one generation to the next. I'm just going to, for my own refresher, I'm going to pull up the all-club first team from last year, and I'm going to read it off. Okay? So I'll start in the men's division. Rowan McDonnell, Jimmy Mickle, Cody Spicer, Tyler Monroe, Joe White, Chris Kocher, Quinn Finer. Okay? Now, just to comment on those.
Quinn Finer was so good.
Oh. There's a couple of...
He was so good last year.
Up-and-coming younger players on this list. Spicer and Finer in particular, and certainly Joe White. But you also have guys who have been at the top level for a long time in Rowan and Mickle and Kocher. I don't know where Timon fits in the conversation. At this point, he's a veteran, but he hasn't necessarily been an all-club first-team level player before. And I don't know, it's kind of weird with Truck Stop. I think back and I don't necessarily think of Tyler Monroe as the best player from last year's team, but it was a hard decision, I think, for who to vote for from Truck, because they had such a team-based performance. But I don't see evidence there, in the men's division anyway, of an obvious changeover in terms of next generation. Let's go to mixed. Robin Fennick, Khalif, Kelly Johnson, Caleb Denacor, Jenny DeJesus, Danielle Byers, Mac Taylor. I mean, my God, Mac Taylor could have been on this list 10 years ago. He's a bit of an anomaly, I will admit that. But, Fennick, Khalif, those are long-standing top players in, and let's say Kelly Johnson too. She's retired now, and so that's obviously direct turnover. Caleb Denacor has been playing for over a decade. These are still the stars of before. Jenny DeJesus, Danielle Byers, new generation. A little bit of both. I think we're going to see the same thing in the women's division. But let's take a look. Valeria Cardenas, Claire Trope, Lev Kowalczak, Britt Dos Santos, Kayla Helton, Manu Cardenas, Claire Chastain.
Two vets. Everybody else is 25 and under.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point. I feel like this list feels a little skewed because of the international component. Like Manu is a vet at this point. And, Valeria is a vet at this point, even though, yes, they're still young. I mean, they barely missed the cutoff for being eligible for U24s, but they have been playing at the highest level now for, 5 years, Keith, at least.
Agreed.
But certainly, Brito Santos and Claire Trope, that's the next generation. So I think we're seeing a little bit of both. The long story short for me is that it's a gradual progression. And if I had to pick players that I thought were going to win Player of the Year this year, I think in the women's division, I would expect it to be somebody under the age of 25. I think in the mixed division, I would expect it to be somebody over the age of 25. And in the men's division, I would also say over the age of 25. So the transition is not happening yet. What do you think, Keith?
I think if you repeated the exercise that you just went through for any all-club team, I think if you picked anyone that we've ever selected, you are probably going to find a roughly similar mix of players who are in the midst of the best part of their career, which, what would you say that is? Like ages 24 to 28, non-Keegan people? Like, I don't know, is that the best part of your career? Maybe the older part where like you're both experienced, but also physically still strong. So like maybe it's like, I don't know, 25 to 29 or something like that. I don't know exactly where you would say, where a player might say their peaks are, but you're going to get a smattering of those players. You're going to get a couple of the vets, players who were just in that period, have been all club players in the past. And then you're going to get some young up and comers. I just think that's it, that's because it's gradual. Like if I pull the 2018 mixed all club team and it's Sarah Mextroth, Peter Pryle, Nikki Spiva, Mac Taylor, Georgia Bosher, Lindsay Simon Fox, and Khalif El Salam, right? Like you get that mix. You get, Bosher and Simon Fox, who were a little bit older than some of the other players on that team. You get Mac, who's right in the middle of his run. Peter Pryle, probably similar. Nikki Spiva. And then you get Mex and Khalif, who were, up and coming players at that time. So I think that's kind of just the pattern. Now, maybe if you just try and cut it off at like 5 best players, you maybe see that a little bit, you maybe see a little more of a hard cutoff, but like even that, like how do you exactly measure who was in that conversation at a given time? We certainly have some all-time greats who are playing right now in each of these divisions, but I also think we have future all-time greats who are playing right now. I think that there's room for both. So, maybe in the women's division, it feels a little more like it stands out, but I think that's probably colored a bit by, I think Fury and Riot's dominance, like overloaded some of those teams earlier in the year, some of the like all club recognitions and stuff, and some of how we look back at that period. And so now that it's opened up a bit more, maybe you see more young players breaking in. Right now, it feels like we've crowned, the Cardenases and Claire Trope as like clearly some of the best players in the world, if not right at the top of the list. So that's a pretty young group who could hold on to that kind of crown for a long time. But yeah, I think that you're always going to see a kind of mix and gradual play. And maybe there's a question of like who feels like they're near the end of that time of being like the truly elite players. And there are some players who are defying that, like look in the women's division, and Kayla Helton like feels like she's better than ever. And a lot of players here might be her age might be near the end of their career or on the decline, but Kayla Helton seems to have defied that. But we just saw Claire Desmond isn't playing with Fury this year. You talk about Vegas, right? Like these are players who have decided that they have other things that they want to do that are more important to them. So that's opening up space. And you wonder, like, will Cammie Groom get to a point where we start to see decline from her? We saw it with Sarah Griffith. So that's just the women's division. You talked about some of the older players in the mixed division, like Mac Taylor. We talked about Kelly Johnson. Who else will we see take some of those steps? Mario O'Brien's on mixtape this year, and he was an all club first teamer in 2021. Is he going to be someone who's like, okay, I think I'm either ready to hang it up or I'm okay taking on a different role on my team. And in the men's division, at some point you're going to start to see Jimmy Mickle decline. Like I feel like we could say, does Dylan Freechild seem like he is quite the player he was at his precipice? I guess by definition, no, but he's declined. Matt Rader, another player, like at some point age pulls everybody out.
Nah, Rader's about to have an all club season. Raider about to go crazy for ring. You heard it here first.
I know. I set it up.
He needed to get out of Seattle. It was time. Yeah, interesting stuff. So send us your mailbag questions. deeplook@ultiworld.com, @deeplookpod on Twitter. Hit us up in the Discord. That is going to do it for this edition of Deep Look. US Open coming up soon. Getting ready for that one with you probably 2 weeks from now. And we're probably going to do a catch-up overall mailbag show next week. So a great chance to get in your questions. And Keith, looking forward to getting rolling into the heart of this club season, and AUDL playoffs coming up soon as well. For Keith Rayner, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying good night and talk to you next week.